afternoon, good evening, regardless of where you're joining from or if you're catching the recording. We are so glad you're here to talk about a pretty interesting topic, something that we get asked about often. But my name's Allison Michels, and I'm just really excited to be here. Yes, we are recording. Yes, we will share the recording and the presentation. We will definitely be posting links all throughout the conversation this morning, this afternoon, this evening for you, as well of where to find some of these resources if you have to drop off or anything like that. If you have questions, we did this session a couple of hours ago for our folks on the other side of the world, and they had great questions. So we would love for you guys to ask questions in the Q&A. If you can see it across the top or along the side or wherever your Q&A app is in Teams. The other piece that, especially if you are listening to things or if something resonates, please use the reactions. I know it doesn't quite translate in the recording, so feel free to go reaction heavy about all the different things. Would love that. Sometimes it's a little hard to do a webinar from some of these. So we'd love the different reactions kind of as we get started. So without further ado, I am going to pass it over to Spencer, and then I will kind of chime in here and there. And then we do have a couple of polls and some questions that we really want to get your guys' feedback on as we kind of go forward. So, all right, Spencer, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Really excited to be here today and talk a bit about this digital safety and moderation topic. As you maybe we've met before, but I'm Spencer. I'm a senior PM here, working in the digital safety space for Viva Engage, and really just excited to meet everybody and really have a good time today. As Allison said, please keep the questions and comments coming. We'll get to them as best we can. As we go through here, what we're going to start with is an overview of the digital safety topic. We want to make sure that we can really level set and share what we're thinking about when it comes to digital safety. Then we're going to go into a series of deep dives about what's available across Engage, followed up by what's coming soon and next on the roadmap, and then some next steps that you folks can take back to your network and use to impart some of these concepts or check out what you've already maybe been using all along. I think the most important place to start is what is digital safety? I think the many different definitions come to mind, but one of the big parts of this concept of digital safety is really about the confidence and the controls necessary to set up a network that aligns with your culture, your goals, and just your overall aims for bringing people together in Viva Engage. We know that Viva Engage is a great way to connect people. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. And it's really, I think, important to think about the way that digital safety and moderation can complement all of the great connections and communications value that's inside of an Engage network. And that really leads us to this point that we want to use digital safety and the best of Viva Engage to foster environments where everybody can participate. We know that participation is just a really unique value of places like communities and storylines, and people don't participate if they don't feel like they are safe or they understand how this whole kind of product works. And so we're going to really talk about how moderation can help you further those overarching goals at every level of your network across all sorts of personas and situations. When I think digital safety too, I immediately jump to scenarios. Maybe you do as well. And I think really if we look across these 4 scenarios, these are really good ways to define the concept just a little bit further. We all know that moderation is a great way to encourage respectful dialogues or make sure that the right voices are heard and that you have a means to make sure that the conversation and the promotion of content goes the way that you expect. But also in terms of digital safety and moderation, we know that keeping an eye on what's going on in the network, seeing network activity is really important. And when issues do come up, you need a full tool set to manage those issues, whether it's at the personal level or the content level. And then when we get into things like reporting mechanisms, we're also looking at how do your users alert you to issues that are maybe going on, or what mechanisms do you have to be proactive in terms of reporting and solving problems that may come up in this moderation and digital safety space. So I think with all of those together, it really gives us a good place to transition and say, what can employees actually do? And when we talk about employees in the Viva Engage sense here, we're talking about users that don't hold roles like admins or corporate communicators. We'll get to them in just a minute. I think it is important, though, to start with, the majority of all the people in the network. So if we look at what employees can do, I'm just going to flash up something I'm sure we've all seen before. This is a conversation card in a community in Viva Engage, and inside of this overflow menu is really the place to start for most users. This is where they find those conversation actions that help them decide how they want to continue on with the conversation outside of comments and replies and using reactions. And so if I'm a user and I look at the conversations I've started, I see these options to manage discussion, right down to editing and deleting or closing a conversation. Some of these options can change whether or not I'm a delegate or not, but I think at the core, you really see that this is where you go to manage those conversations that you've started as a user. And it's important to think about this because we know features like close a conversation are a great way to say, you know what, we've had enough commentary on this issue, or we're gonna just end the discussion right now. But we want to keep the item still available in the network for everyone to get value from. But also as a user, I mean, sometimes you delete stuff or you make changes based on what you get back from the larger group. And it's just really important, I think, that users are familiar with all of these conversation actions. Which also leads us to an item that jumps off of that overflow menu, which is reporting conversations. Employees can report conversations and engage, and really it allows them to report from the overflow menu and report off the entire thread. They can use the text box to alert specific items that have caused them to leave this report. But I think in general, this is a really great way to advise employees that if they see something that concerns them or they want someone to know about, it's a really powerful feature. Obviously, report a conversation is not anonymous. It says so right there, and it's really important to get that across, based on whatever context or sort of cultural norms you have around reporting. We've also seen, as you can see from this example, organizations often reminding users that if it's particularly egregious or serious, it's worth using maybe a central tool for workplace investigations or other destinations. And admins, as we'll get into in a moment, will be able to review these reported conversations and take action. And I think, for a lot of the experience that we've seen, sometimes it's as simple as using one of those options like closing a conversation or moving the post right up to, more formal and serious investigations from reporting. So it's a really central and important concept to get across when you're looking at what users can do in the moderation and digital safety space.
All right, Spencer, before you go further and talk about as an admin and what they can do, I'm going to launch a quick poll. Have any of you actually or ever reported a conversation before? Would love to know if you've ever reported a conversation. Your own self as an employee, not been on the receiving end of receiving a reported conversation. Feel free to. And if you have a need to describe in more detail, feel free to drop it in the chat.
Interesting. So a lot of folks have actually, I think everybody has never reported one, which is maybe a good thing, but maybe also it's a chance to just double check and look at the information that we're going to share today and consider if it's enabled for your organization or if you want to use it. Thanks so much for the feedback. This is great. We'll have a few more of these polls coming up as well. Okay, so now I want to get into the other kind of side of the equation here around who can do what at a moderation and digital safety level. We're going to talk about admins. Now, the term admin can mean a lot of things. So quick recap of what we mean by admins in Engage. We have, a set of roles here, but we're going to focus on network administrators, corporate communicators, and community administrators for all of our time today. There are other admin roles that have powers very similar to what we're going to show here, but this is really where the bread and butter, the core of the network moderation and digital safety capabilities lie. And so you'll see as we go through this where the admin capabilities kind of line up, but just keep that in mind as we go forward. And so to continue on the reported conversation train, setting up reported conversation is super important for network admins to consider. This feature is off by default, but you can go ahead and set it up in the admin center. And from there, as you can see on the screen, it allows you to determine the source of where the reports are going to go. We have email address options, but also we have communication compliance in Purview is another place you can route your conversations from this reported conversations tool. But that's always only part of it. We really encourage folks to decide, what are you going to do after you get a report? What sort of plan of action is that going to fit? Do you need to coordinate with other people or other teams? And in sort of looking at that landscape, we have some general guidance that might help around determining moderation criteria, whether it's how big is the post, or how big is the kind of the blast radius of what's happened? Is it getting a lot of comments? Are people seeing a lot of activity at that level? Is that a bar to help us decide how to manage this issue after it's been reported? Are there guidelines, in terms of how you manage what's going to happen as a result of the reported conversation? We have some examples of customers worldwide where they use a system of tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, that post is not appropriate for X, Y, or Z reason. We'd really appreciate if you could change it or take it down. And then, from there on, you can get more, you can escalate that further. And then also the sample messaging. This is another option. We've also seen cases where folks are reported conversations, done the review, decided, yeah, that definitely meets the bar. And it's great to just drop a nice message into the thread before you take action and maybe say, thanks everybody for all the inputs. We're actually going to close this conversation now, and we'll continue this discussion elsewhere. All of that is available to you, and I think is really important when you turn on report a conversation. And it definitely is something that admins want to think about and work with corp comms, maybe HR, all sorts of people, to make sure that they set up the right ecosystem around these reports. When we lean into those reporting and those proactive capabilities, we also need to talk about keyword monitoring. Keyword monitoring is another network admin feature that allows you to track terms that are used across the network, and you'll get an email every time somebody uses one of those terms. It is an exact term, phrase, and match, so it's something to consider, that not only do you get an email, but that email can be a serious volume if you're tracking a term that's really common. So we encourage people to kind of think about that when they're inputting the terms they want to track. And then from those notifications, you can get through to the thread and decide how you want to manage that. Maybe it's benign, you just let it go, you keep going. But this is a really important space, and it's a really, really powerful tool for keeping an eye on what users are doing at scale in the network.
Just a tip really quick,
Yeah.
back onto that, kind of being able to triage. We say kind of a shared mailbox. Somebody had shared earlier in the other session, if they had a Teams channel for the group of folks who moderate and manage kind of the Engage network, that could also be Teams channels have an email address, so that could also be pulled in here to kind of, maybe there's that discussion and fodder too. So kind of depending on, you can only have one email address. So, be thoughtful about how you're thinking about kind of looping in the right person as well in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great tip. Definitely. Thank you. And as we go through then too, I think, if we look at what can happen in the conversation level, you have to think about the user side of the equation. And so we have this area now where you can manage users in the admin center. And there are two features as a network admin that you really want to familiarize yourself with when you're looking at digital safety and moderation. First one is view only mode. That GA'd worldwide in August, or earlier this month. And that is a really interesting feature. We'll talk about it in a granular detail there, but in general, it puts users in a place where they don't have any creation privileges anymore, but they can still access the network. And then also a very exciting and new feature coming out this fall, mute user for network, which allows you to say this person, their posts, their new threads will not reach anybody through the home feed or email digests. So you want to maybe reduce the visibility of a specific user in their posts. I like to think that these two go together almost on a spectrum. Depending on the situation and the context, you may or may not want to use one, but they're really good together as you're looking at how we're going to manage user conduct and the content that users create and engage. So if we look at the view only mode in the admin center, you can see it allows you to add that user. You can see who's put somebody on view only mode. You can see the date, and you can manage the status there. And from that from that screen, we'll jump over to the employee view. So employees that are in view only mode, they do have an indication they're in that mode. There's a banner at the top. There's a link for them to learn more. But otherwise, you can see this conversation view. A lot of the options are grayed out if they're not available. Can't write a comment. They can't react. They definitely can't create new threads. But they'll still get notifications if their leaders are sending communications. They can still browse the network and maintain all of that goodness and access to important communications and content that folks need. And then for mute user for network, there is no indication in the front end for a user if they've been muted. But in the admin center, you can always see who's been muted. You can get information to learn more about the feature before or after you use it. And we actually sent a message center post about this feature on August 22nd. So definitely check your M365 admin center or message centers posts if you haven't. There's a full amount of information there about what's coming and how the feature works. So continuing with our options for admins and how they can look at digital safety and moderation, I think another really good way to round out what we've talked about around user conduct, reporting conversations, keyword monitoring is to look at the usage policy. Usage policy is most visible in the top right of a lot of folks' home pages of their Engage network in the admin centers where you can set what shows there and how the usage policy works. When you set up a usage policy, you can require users to opt in and confirm that they've read the update. It also works if you make a change. So if you haven't changed your usage policy in a while, or you want to make sure that everybody's opted in and checked is really comfortable with what's in there, we do have a mechanism for you to do that. But in general, the usage policy is really a good way to set the bedrock or set the tone for your network. And then as you carry forward your moderation and digital safety activities, it's a place to refer users back to remind users that there's a way that we conduct ourselves in the workplace, both online and offline, and that the same rules apply to Engage as might apply in a break room or in the office. So I really think that the usage policy, again, if you haven't used it or you're not familiar with it, check it out. And it's also a great way to engage partners in HR and legal and other parts of your business that probably have a thought or are curious about what's going on in this space. And this is a great way to have those conversations. So now as we get into the community level, we're talking still about network admins. A lot of these options are also available to community admins, and we'll talk about them in depth in just a second. But for network admins at the community level, there's two things that I think are really important. Number one is editing and checking your community posting permissions. In Engage, you can set up what's called a restricted community as a network admin. If you set up a restricted community, the only people that can post in that community are network admins. That has a really powerful kind of use case if you're looking at doing maybe a one-way channel. Maybe it's a large community where you know that folks are going to have a lot of comments and a lot of thoughts about what's created, but you want to control who can actually start new threads. We also encourage people to take a quick look at the toggle moving conversations into the community feature. This is available on all communities for community admins and network admins. When you click that, it's just like it says in the name. Users cannot move conversations into that community. Great way to keep people on topic. Great way to put some governance around the move feature if that's something that you're concerned about. And in general, this came out earlier this year, and it's been really popular worldwide with a lot of communities, particularly when there's a defined topic and you want to keep people, like I said, focused on that discussion. When it comes to muting communities and feeds and digests, like muting a user, this is a great way to consider what can actually show in the home feed and digest. Only people that see that content in the home feed or digests are members of that community. There is a caveat here if you're using dynamic group memberships, but I think it's fairly straightforward. But when network admins use the mute community feature, they can mute a community on behalf of everybody. Users also have this option, and when users do it, they can mute it for themselves. This is a great way to respond to feedback of folks say, how come I'm seeing so much from this community in my feed? Is there anything I can do about it? I'm not really interested in this. You can always encourage people to mute communities, or as an admin, if you are getting that feedback, maybe it's a community about a niche topic, go ahead and mute it. The members themselves won't know, or they won't have a negative impact, but it might help at scale as you're trying to figure out how does everything fit together and how do we make sure we get people looking and contributing in the right places. And finishing up on community moderation considerations, I really just want to hit on these three themes. A lot of communities, well, all of our communities are backed by groups. So a lot of the constructs there around moderation that apply to groups also apply to communities. The one in the middle, community creation, is a really interesting one. If you want to limit how users can create communities, you can handle this at the group level. There's a lot of documentation that we can point you to that has all the steps involved there. But it is an option if you are looking to set up the kind of network where users can't create communities at scale. We find that there's a lot of reasons to allow people to set up communities in general, just across the network. But again, it's available. It's a tool for you if you are concerned about moderation and digital safety on the community front. Okay, so we've made it through a big chunk. I really appreciate everyone's time. The questions and comments coming in are great. Thank you, Allison, for responding to that, and Sandra. I really appreciate it. And I want to talk about a really important aspect about everything we've just talked about, which is promotion. Moderation is not just about going around and hiding things and taking things away. It's also about pointing the network and the conversation in the direction that you wish to go. And we really think that there's a lot of compelling tools in Engage that can help people cut through, all sorts of things that are happening by nature in the network and allow people to get the messages out to the users. So number one is announcements. I think we're all pretty familiar with announcements. They're a great way to target audiences. There's notification options that allow you to reach people in Outlook and Teams, kind of cut through the noise of the day-to-day, but they need to be used sparingly. They're very powerful. So that's why featured conversations are another really good option, because they get priority treatment in feeds and digests, and employees see one at a time. So if you have a large queue of featured conversations, the home feed will manage that. Featured conversations, by the way, if you haven't seen it, are the conversation cards with the blue outline around the outside. So that's something to look for or potentially experiment with. And then finally, pinning conversations. You can pin conversations at the top of community feeds. We actually have a new multi-pin feature that will allow you to pin multiple conversations to the top. And pinning conversations is a great way to set the tone in a community or remind people of maybe evergreen or longer standing messages as they're navigating throughout the network. And so together, these are really good, simple promotion tools to balance out all of the full range of moderation and digital safety features we've just talked about. And that last point I really just want to hit home is that we offer discussion, question, praise, and poll posts in Engage. And using all to the fullest extent is a great way to encourage participation and to really promote the right level of engagement depending on what you're looking for. Definitely recommend asking questions if you're trying to get answers from people and you want to try to have a way to organize that information in the future. Praise is super powerful, very straightforward. Polls, we've actually just shipped a bunch of new value around polls this year. And again, those are a great way, as we're doing in this meeting, to have a quick hit of engagement. What do people think about this? How should we go forward? And then obviously there's discussion posts at the core of it all, the large scale conversation that engaged us so well.
All right. So, I have a poll really quick about featured conversations. Curious about you all. I'm going to launch it. Featured conversations sometimes feels like a little bit of a secret weapon that you all should have in your back pocket to really promote some of the good stuff. How often are you using these across your network? Let us know. Really curious about that.
Yeah, me too. Oh, this is interesting. The results are already coming in. This is great. Folks, definitely keep an eye on the chat as you see the votes come in. It's fairly even. There's a lot of people that use featured conversations. There's a good chunk of folks that seem to have never used it. Maybe look for an opportunity. It's a great tool to help users see a good message. And so we'll round out this section by talking again about community admins. And when you look at managing community conversations, we really just want to drive the point home that community admins have a lot of the same capabilities available to them that post creators and network admins do, but scope to the community context. Knowing that community admins often can have, maybe no other roles in the product. They're really just there to manage a set of people about a specific topic. Community admins do have the latitude to do things like delete, edit, close, and pin content to make sure that community dialogue and discussion goes the way that they want. So now I want to switch gears a little bit and I want to talk about what's next. We've talked about what we have today. We've talked about a lot of rationale for why things are the way they are and what we've done up till this point. And there's so much coming in the future that is super exciting from the team. I really I think everybody's going to be really excited about what we're doing in the next period here. There are 3 places that we're focusing our attention. Number one, additional moderation capabilities for corporate communicators. We know this is a really important role. Corporate communicators often have a very serious impact in the network. They're doing a lot of great stuff in Engage day to day. So we're going to tool this role, with more moderation capabilities that you may see at levels like network admins, but also may be unique to the corporate communicator. Second, we've touched on this a little bit, but we're going to keep moving in this direction. Proactive value to manage ahead of issues. We want to offer a full set of capabilities that allow you to get ahead of issues, to manage the network in the way you want it without necessarily relying on reports or other sort of maybe more reactive means to get the information that you need to make moderation and digital safety decisions. And three, you can expect a wave of Copilot and AI-powered moderation efforts to really help you scale impact and reduce effort. We know this is a complex space. It moves fast. You have a million other things to do, and we think that AI and Copilot especially can really help, as it says right there, make you have a better impact without necessarily increasing the level of effort that's necessary to do moderation in a network. We always will keep the human in the loop. We'll make sure that folks have control over all sorts of aspects of the experience, but it would be really good from the proactive perspective if we can continue to infuse more AI value in the moderation and digital safety space. So what do you do next? What can you take back to your network? Where can you think about, where to go from here with everything we've discussed? I think it's really a 5-point checklist. We've talked about the importance of turning on reported conversation and setting up a good system around that. We've talked about updating the usage policy and making sure that you're using that at the level that you wish. What we haven't talked about, and I think is important, is to look at All Company again. All Company is often the number one place that users spend time in the network. It's a big, busy surface, and it may do with a little bit of extra moderation to help you accomplish more of the goals in that powerful, large surface. And then from All Company, go ahead and inventory all the other communities. Maybe take a look at muting things that don't need to be seen by everybody in the network. Maybe look and see where can you spend a little bit more time with community admins to make sure that everybody in those communities is getting the support that they need. And that really kind of dovetails with the last point, which is check permissions and roles. Are the right people admins? Should people have different privileges than maybe you've assigned? Maybe it's time to use something like view only mode on someone based on how things have gone in the online or offline world. I really think this checklist is a good one to consider. Definitely take a screenshot or something and take it back to your team because it's a really good resource. And so speaking of resources, we have a couple of blogs on the tech community. My colleague Shakar wrote a great blog called Moderating Content in Viva Engage. It covers a lot of the concepts that were in this presentation in a nice written format. Great resource to share with your team or put in a central location. There's also good instructions on the tech community about how to set up report a conversation through communication compliance if you have access to Purview and you're looking at how to do that. And then otherwise in the support content, we've shared a ton in the chat, but all the features that we've talked about today have volumes of how things work in the support library. So please, just everything's a click away. It's a really good place to familiarize yourself if you haven't been there in a while. And then as an Engage admin, again, why not check out all the great ways that we have to set up roles, look at core features like Leadership Corner and Answers, and really just lean into all the great stuff that's happening on digital safety and moderation. It's a wonderful place to spend time in and amongst all the other value that's in Engage. And so, yeah, we wish you the best, and thank you so much for everybody's time. Please let's do some Q&A and see what else is on your mind around digital safety and moderation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Spencer. We do have a few questions. Yes, clapping, real clapping and emoji clapping. Thanks so much. Great conversations going on in the chat and some great Q&A. I wanted to kind of bring back the attention of the view only mode or the mute user mode. Do you have any scenarios or examples of kind of what was maybe the reasoning behind creating some of those or kind of the problems you're trying to solve from that perspective?
Yeah, so for view only mode, that was a long-standing customer request in some corners around, maybe you are looking at user content or user conduct, and you're saying, okay, so something's happened, and the best thing that we could do before this feature was, ask users not to post anymore or find some other way to kind of control access. And at the same time, we want to make sure that people have the ability to continue to see content. So no solution was really perfect before we created this. And that was one of the reasons why we went in this direction, was to say, there are situations where you have people who you don't want to create, but are still part of the network. They need to be able to access everything. So that was that. For muting a user, we also know that there are times where an individual just isn't appropriate. Their content may not be appropriate for the large scale discovery surfaces. And so it's an option. View only mode is maybe too harsh or not the right feature. So you can just gently reduce the visibility of posts from a user, and over time maybe do some monitoring, see if you need to make any other changes. So that was really the context that brought us here, and those were the way that I think those two features can really fit together as you're looking at user conduct and engage.
Yeah. Sandra, feel free.
Yeah, and there was a comment earlier about like when should we use these types of features. For the most part, what we hear is that a lot of people, just because it is in the company space, will behave, will try to honor, the policies and stuff. But then every now and then you just have some people who continue to either ignore it or trip over it. And so the recommendation is to have layers in which you can kind of get the message to them, let them learn that they need to behave, or things will go further. So the first step would be to say to go and minimize the visibility of some of their posts or particular topics into these digests, and the notifications, and have the conversation with them that if you continue to repeat your behavior, that you will lose the ability to post. And then you can go to that next level of, okay, we've given you a chance, you're still not abiding by the corporate policy and the user guidelines. So now we're going to put you into a read-only mode until you can behave, and you can choose, the time frame you want to use for that. We haven't actually set it to any specific one because we see it all over the place, and so you can control when you turn it on and off.
Great. I know at the company I was at previously, we always had somebody posting the lunch menu every day. And so it, was just, it wasn't that it was not, appropriate, it was just, so we just kind of, muted that. It would have been great to mute that user. They wouldn't have known, and it would have been all good. Even after we said, nobody wants to see that, we can all see it on our phones or whatever the case is. So I love it. Okay, another question that came in was, I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about the keyword monitoring. Somebody was asking, we've been experimenting with this, and maybe kind of, is it the exact phrase? Do we need to use quotation? Anything else extra? We also answered it kind of in the chat, but from a recording perspective, any other best practices around the keyword monitor functionality?
So right off the top, it will match like phrases as well as text terms. So keep that in mind as you're experimenting with the feature. I think the best practice of keyword monitoring is to be specific. Use terms that when they come up, you're going to have a line of sight into the context, or yes, okay, great, that's definitely something we want to track. I think if you track a lot of terms, or you track general terms without a clear idea of why you actually want that information, there can be a lot of noise, and that can actually make it harder to track the terms that you're really sensitive about or you're really concerned about. So that takes time, but I would definitely keep an eye on that as you're using keyword monitoring and say, what's fluff that we can cut? That term hasn't really yielded anything meaningful for our team. Oh, but this other stuff is super important and we definitely want to track it. That would be my best practice there, is be open to making changes on the fly as you get the data back from the network as to how people are using those terms and strings.
Okay, great. And then another question that kind of came in that maybe you could elaborate a little bit is maybe any suggestion of like governance or framework of like, is this centrally managed? Do you have decentralized best practices? Yeah, what level of admin access? We've kind of shared some resources of which who can do what and kind of how their rights are, but maybe anything else you have to add about best practices that you've seen from your customers and the interactions that you've had.
I think the one best practice I'll consider like maybe sharing is that we have a lot of customers that set up communities for just admins, usually private communities in Engage, and that allows us space to talk about admin stuff with other admins, maybe people in the same role. And that could be a great resource because, companies are large, there's people all over the world doing similar roles, and it's a great way to share insights and learn. So that would actually be the best way, I think, if you're looking to sort of get that line of decentralized versus centralized is start a community with people that have similar roles and see how they can come together and really share their best practices. I think the cool part about moderation and digital safety is there's many ways to do this work, and the context will change, the time of the era will change, and if people are working together and talking, it becomes, I think, a lot easier to scale impact and just get a sense of what's working.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Maybe another question coming in. Let me see. Live. Oh, thoughts on restricting all company for only leaders and comms employees posting, but all other employees can respond and react.
We've seen this in a lot of places, and it's a really good way to keep all company on topic. The one kind of thing you might want to consider if you go down that route is how are you going to maintain the two-way dialogue in that kind of a community when you go ahead and restrict a big one like all company. You may want to set up a parallel space where everyone can create threads that is a little bit more of that open forum, but it is a really good use case, and it's a really good way to get messages out at scale from a restricted community. And it's a great way if you're looking to transition more of your, I'll just call it company-wide communications to Engage, because you know that we're going to create the messages and we're going to get responses back from people. So yeah, don't lose them both. Don't lose both sides. You probably want to put together both in a good way, and just consider how you're going to drive more of that larger forum type discussion.
Yeah, Kevin puts in the chat that they did something similar. My only other kind of best practice to that is if you haven't yet turned on storylines, that might be a great way if you kind of restrict all company, turn on storylines if you haven't, just for that, then employees still have a place to post, but maybe it's a more appropriate amount of reach, right? Because the storylines is based on their followers versus throwing it into all companies. So definitely that's a great idea to kind of pull it all together. So all right, with that, I hope this isn't the last time we talk and hear from you all as you guys are setting these things up and refreshing these or need some more best practices. I'm going to share a link in the chat, but would love for you to be a part of our customer community. If you're not already a customer, a part of our customer community, that's where we share, upcoming, additional upcoming webinars, the new releases that Spencer was talking about. If you have feedback about any of these places, that's a really good way to join in and share, or something doesn't feel right, or who's got best practices, or anybody have a usage policy we can glean information on. So that's a really great place. And then of course, we will post the slides to the adoption resources, and then we'll post a recording to our YouTube playlist. So if you've ever missed any of our other webinars, feel free to check out that playlist as well. We've got all the recordings for that. So thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have an awesome evening for those of us still in the US, and we can't wait to see you again. All right, take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.